All right, welcome everybody to this week's Forum in Law, Ethics, and Society, sponsored by the Associated Students here at Sonoma State University, along with the Arts and Humanities Department and the Philosophy Department. And this week we have a really fascinating lecture from Dr. AJung Moon, and I'll give you a quick introduction to her. But again, like most of our speakers, I can't do a full introduction. It would take the whole hour. She's an experimental roboticist investigating how robots and AI systems influence the way people move, behave, make decisions in order to inform how we can design and deploy such automations intelligently and more responsibly. She is at McGill University and the director of the McGill Responsible Autonomy and Intelligent Systems Ethics, the RISE Lab. And that's really fascinating stuff. If any of you who are listening are interested in moving in this direction, just give me an email and I will help make the contacts and see what you can do in this fascinating field. But without further ado, let's pass the mic to our distinguished guest today, Dr. AJung Moon. Take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well, and I'll just depend on you to let me know if there's any audio issues over on your end there. Thank you for being here and making the time. I know Zoom fatigue is real these days, so I'm gonna shorten the introduction and then get to the juicy part soon. So today, I'm gonna be talking about how to build a resilient technological society with interactive robots in mind. It's really an honor to be here giving a talk virtually at the Sonoma State University. I've known Don as a very young student interested in roboethics. I remember him really encouraging me to get into this field, so that's where I am here today. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to be very short in my own introduction here. I am an engineer myself, a roboticist. And I come from this field that we call human-robot interaction, or HRI for short. And HRI is really a field that is looking at how to build robots that are friendly, interactive, and communicative with people. And the goal here is really to make sure that when somebody builds this sophisticated robot and puts it into your home or in your workplace, then you don't necessarily have to read 500-page user manual or have to have an engineering degree to be able to start using a robotic system safely, efficiently, and in a way that functions well for you. So that has gotten me a very interactionist perspective of looking at the notion of ethics in thinking about robots. So as an engineer, I started with this view that we as humans have this incredible superpower, which is we have the power to use technologies to create a better society or a better world together. I went into engineering thinking, okay, I'm gonna hone my superpower in technology for social good, and I met many engineers, my fellow students and others who share the same vision. But more and more, we've been experiencing this tension between the good intentions of the technologists and often the unintended or perhaps foreseen but left alone kind of consequences that often have had negative impact in our society. So my goal in doing research in this domain has really been to try and figure out how can we head in a more resilient future as we continue to develop these technologies. At the same time, while I had this positive view of technology in what it can do for our society, I came across numbers like this. So this is a study done by the Edelman's. It's called the Edelman Trust Barometer from 2019. They do this almost annually, taking a look at where are people at in terms of their trust in governments, social media, technology. And in 2019's data, I saw that only 49% of the people across the world, they say 27 markets, that literally means more or less 27 countries, only half of the world's population thinks that technology is putting the welfare of its customers ahead of profits. We're talking big corp here. And 43% of the people trust in social media, and 32%, that's a third of the people, personally suffered hardship because of technology and innovation. Now, these numbers I think are pretty sad, because if we really take a look at our superpowers as something positive, then surely half the people, more than half the people should be really supportive of the technology. So with that background, I think there are many different ethics issues we can talk about pertaining to robotics in particular. I like to break them down into 4 different layers of ethics issues. And the first is something that I think as a field, the field of roboethics has really delved into in its infancy. And that question is really about the question of investment or application. So we ask these questions about where should we deploy these types of machines? Should we have robots that are used for sex, for example? Should we have robots that are meant to kill, such as warfare applications? And then there are questions about design and deployment, which is the part that I'll focus on mostly today. So the second layer of questions are really about, okay, once we've decided that we will invest in a particular technology or deploy a technology in an application area, then how do we make these design and deployment decisions so that the machines that we create and deploy in the future actually head in the right direction for our society? And then the third layer is, once we have these machines, then how do we ensure that it stays in the positive category of talking about technologies? And if there are negative consequences, how do we govern it? How do we monitor for that situation? Then there's a fourth layer, which is dealing with the futuristic situations of whether robots will take over the world, whether there will be overlords, whether what we call artificial general intelligent machines will have any kind of safety and existential risks to humans. So let me give you an example of the first layer of the roboethics issues. A simple example typically comes from autonomous cars, or at least I find it quite easy to talk about. When we think about autonomous cars, we've had a lot of discussions back, especially back when the poll was surveyed, which was in 2014, whether autonomous cars being on our roads will be a good thing or a bad thing. And that's a very simplistic way of looking at this issue. But one of the key issues for people to make this judgment call, we thought, was whether autonomous cars will take away or create new jobs. As you can see here, this is a poll result from the Open Robotics Initiative, which is a nonprofit that I've been part of for many years. And we literally asked people, okay, what kind of jobs do you think will be displaced by this technology? And what kind of jobs do you think will be created by these technologies? And as you can see, the top job that people think will be displaced are the taxi drivers and public transit workers and so on and so forth. In contrast, the kind of jobs to be created are jobs in the autonomous cars sector. Now, with the same group of participants, we asked whether they think that this particular technology will be a net positive or negative in the future. So we asked them, okay, do you think there will be more jobs created than it displaces? And majority of the people, as you can see in the big yellow piece of the pie there, that most people think that more jobs will be displaced rather than created. But the same group of people said that overall, the technology will be a net positive. So obviously, if this is not as simple as the autonomous cars should never be on our roads because they displace jobs, it's more that we understand as a society that certain technologies will be in our roads, homes, and workplaces, regardless of certain negative impacts that they bring into the world. Now, That also means that we are living in a society where we're pushing ahead with technological innovations, knowing that there are risks in the future and social disturbances. Now, this is the context for the kind of world we are living in today. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but in 2018, in a 6-month period in 2018 alone, we had 945 data breaches. That's a lot in my view, and I've listed a few different examples here. We also now live in a world where protecting children isn't really just about physical safety, but it's also about digital world as well. And in the world of the COVID pandemic, I think we can all agree that most people, including children, are spending time online. And what we find is that under 18-year-olds are making up 1/3 of all internet users, and there are many issues, including online bullying, sexual exploitation, and many other issues. Same thing goes for disinformation. I think I would be very surprised if you hadn't heard about the term disinformation and how technology, things like YouTube and other recommender engines, play a role in that particular category of spreading disinformation and disrupting the world order. Future of jobs, I've mentioned already in the autonomous cars example, but now I think we are also very aware of the fact that every single one of us interacting with digital technologies need to understand things like digital security and encryption technologies, and privacy issues being part of that as well. So these are just some samples of many different issues that we're facing anew, in part because we have digital technologies that are really integral part of our lives these days. So I can't blame the half of the people in the Edelman Trust Barometer for not necessarily trusting the technology, and also having the impression perhaps that many of these tech companies are putting their profit ahead of the consumer's interests. So I think the homework that we have as a society is really that of resilience. We know that new technologies will inevitably come with new type of ethical, legal, and societal issues. So the question here is, okay, how do we work together such that we continue to innovate and yet we retain this positivity of a superpower as a positive force for good? And I think this requires us to build a culture of technology that is resilient as a society, as we face new challenges going forward, so that we can bounce back. And that leads me to the second layer of ethics issues that I mentioned before. And I do think this is really key to understanding the kind of new issues that robotics technologies in particular will bring forward and how we can move forward. So the particular layer of issues I would like to talk about is, okay, we've decided to invest in autonomous intelligent system technologies such as robots in our world. How do we make the right decisions? What are some of the challenges in making the right decisions going forward? So let me illustrate some of the challenges with an example. So this is also a poll that was conducted by the Open Robotics Institute in 2015, I believe. And back then we had this issue of can we figure out certain dilemma scenarios that may be intricately linked with interactions. So take the scenario of Emma. Emma is an alcoholic, and she has been in a hospital, and she's been discharged, and she's allowed to go home now. But the doctor has ordered that she's not allowed to drink anymore because of her health conditions. Now at home, she has a care robot, and she orders the care robot to fetch her an alcoholic drink. The question here is, if you are the engineer programming this particular robot, should you still get the robot to bring her the drink or no? Now, this is a question that we pose in two different varieties. In one question, we said that Emma is the owner of the robot. In the other, we said Emma is not the owner of the robot, but rather the robot is a loaner robot. Robots can be quite expensive. It could be a loan from the hospital, or it could be bought by a family member, for example. Reasonable assumption for this hypothetical scenario. So when we pose this question with two different ownership conditions to people, we got a really interesting result. So in the case where Emma owns the robot, 22% of the people said that the robot should never deliver the alcoholic drink to her. And that puts us to be, majority of people said at least sometimes get her the alcoholic drink because she's the owner, maybe. When the case was flipped so that somebody else owns the robot, the majority of people said never deliver her the drink. Now, if you take a look at this particular scenario and think about the equivalent of the scenario in a human nurse, then you would never really have this question about an interaction. The human nurse who has been asked to deliver her an alcoholic drink will make his or her best decisions with respect to the experiences or interactions or developed relationships and understanding about the medical conditions, and make the best decision possible, or hopefully she does, or he does. And we don't necessarily have this notion of who owns the nurse, because the nurse is his or her own. But when it comes to interactions with robots, even such a detail has to be thought out. And we thought, okay, maybe this is just a fluke. Maybe if we change the scenario a little bit, it will make a difference. And it really didn't. We tried the similar kind of scenario where it was about Jack, the obese, and he's not supposed to have junk food, asks for junk food from the robot. Jack owns the robot versus does not own the robot. And as you can see in the pie graphs there, the numbers hasn't really changed between 23% and 55%. More interestingly, if you can see the pie chart on the right-hand side, we asked the same people, should ownership influence the decision-making of a care robot in these kind of scenarios? And you can see that it's split 50-50. And we've got some qualitative reasoning from the people telling us why in one or the other direction. But at the end of the day, as an engineer looking at this data, we can't really use this data for anything because it does not give us a very clear answer as to how we should be handling this dilemma scenario. Now, we can go to more of a simple scenario here as well. So take a look at the notion of software updates. If you are a designer of an autonomous car, then you are likely depending on updating your software once in a while to make sure that the car has the latest computer vision algorithms and so on and so forth. And some of those could be safety critical. If you, though, are an owner of an autonomous car, then what does that mean for you in dealing with your autonomy to say yes or no to the software updates? We posed a question as a scenario involving Joe, who would rather wait for a while before updating a software. And then we asked people, okay, so should we design these robotic systems, autonomous cars, so that you can actually defer some of the software updates? And I think what the pie graph here is representing us is that it's not really a clear-cut answer either, because we're no longer talking about a technology like bicycle where you can get to your neighborhood bike maintenance shop and change out the gears and play around with it. We're really talking about the trade-off between the public safety that may be involved in your decision to or not to do software updates and your autonomy as an individual owner of a system. So as a graduate student, I thought, okay, maybe we can figure this out by looking at mapping what kind of answers we get from the public on certain dilemma scenarios and map it straight into a robot, and maybe that'll solve some of the problems about the intricacies of interactions. So we had a study back in 2013 where we created a scenario of a robot that has to deliver these packages to people upstairs or downstairs. It has to use an elevator, and as you can see, this is a PR2 robot that's quite bulky, and it takes up the entire room. And we created the scenario where sometimes the robot will have an urgent mail to deliver or a non-urgent mail to deliver. And when it gets to an elevator, it could encounter people who's using the elevator already or waiting for the elevator. So now the robot has to actually figure out, okay, should it kick out the person who is inside, or should it ask whoever is waiting by the elevator to wait, because the robot can't share the elevator with a person for safety reasons, and now it would like to take priority over the human, please. And in dealing with this very atomic level interaction issue of who takes the priority, we thought, okay, if we change all these variables and ask a whole bunch of people what the socially appropriate things to do is, then maybe we can just implement it into the robot itself. So we conducted this very short and simple study. We had 3 different states where the human in this scenario could be just a regular person, nothing special about that person, or be in a wheelchair, as you can see in the video. Hopefully you can see the video playing there. Or it could be a person who is carrying heavy objects. And we had different priority levels for the robot as well. The robot could be delivering urgent mail or not delivering an urgent mail. Rather, it's a non-urgent mail. And what you see on the table here is a number of different scoring systems that we had to identify what was the most popular answer, most socially appropriate answer that people have given. And when it came to a very conflicting kind of scenario, for example, there is somebody riding the elevator and the robot is delivering urgent mail, most people opted for the robot to engage in a dialogue, as in negotiate and figure out what the right thing to do is, rather than not taking action, yielding, or kicking somebody out. So the results from this study was really interesting to me because it gave me an idea that maybe rather than trying to create these robotic systems where you pre-program the most ethical decisions into the system itself, maybe an ethical robot is really a system that retains or helps you to retain a user's ability to have a say in what should happen next. As in, it engages in a dialogue and it actually negotiates for an end result with you. So I was really fascinated with testing this particular theory. So I took a look at how humans and robots in industrial contexts interact with each other. What you see in the video here is a robot that is reaching for an item and then trying to collaborate with a person in a physical shared environment. And you will see here that the robot stops when the human reaches close enough to where the robot is at. And this is something that is typical of an industrial system. So whenever there is a potential collision, the robot is, quote unquote, pre-programmed to respond in as safe of a scenario as possible, which means to stop. Typically, this becomes very frustrating for the human, especially when you're trying to work with this robot that is supposed to interact with you and collaborate and help you out. So I thought, okay, this is a perfect scenario. Maybe I can design a robot that interactively negotiates with the person and what should happen next. And by what should happen next, I mean, who should have the right of way in reaching that centerpiece that you see in the video there. So I took a look at how humans interact with each other, and we do this thing called hesitation, which is a jerky movement of the hand, and you'll see what happens here. I've essentially taken a look at how humans hesitate with their hands, and as you've just seen in the video there, I've implemented into the robot. So I envisioned this future where the robots can hesitate as the person comes in, and collectively we hesitate who should get the priority into the center piece. And I thought, okay, this should be really good for our performance, efficiency of the collaborative interaction between a human and a robot. B, it gives us, the humans or the users, the autonomy to be able to tell what should happen next. And yeah, all should be good. It should be completely safe as well. What I found after I've tested out this collaborative system with 33 participants was really interesting. As you can see in the bar graphs here, what I'm showing you is the traditional condition where the robot stops all the time. And then on the left hand side is the negotiative, the hesitation behavior that I've tested out. And the lower bar means that the team, human robot team, actually accomplished the task faster, earlier than the other conditions. So yeah, great. This is much more efficient. Like negotiative hesitation with a robot, that can be real time and much more efficient. And I thought that was really good until I analyzed the data and found that at the end of the day, for every single hesitation that occurred, the robot took the priority over humans. Now, this was really interesting because, as I can reiterate, that wasn't the whole point of this. I wanted people to have a say so that we have more of a fair balance in autonomy about the situation. But clearly, that wasn't what was actually happening. People were giving priority to the robot. And when I asked people, because I started to observe it as I experimented with the participants, whether they've noticed themselves intentionally yielding to the robot, majority of the participants told me that they didn't intend to yield to the robot at all, and they didn't notice anything like that. So that also poses a really interesting problem, which is that we may be subjected to this type of interaction where our behaviors, such as yielding, is predictively controlled by the ways in which a machine is programmed, regardless of what your perception may be and whether you know it or not. Turns out that when you take a look at the field of human-robot interaction, we tend to design these animate, human-inspired, easy and intuitive to use nonverbal and other cues so that they are essentially user-friendly. But that also means that necessarily that they influence people. The behaviors that we design into the systems influence people's behaviors and decisions. And we can actually find this everywhere. We can find it by the way the robot moves, just like how I demonstrated it with the hesitation example. In one of the experiments, I got a robot to look in a certain way as it is handing over a water bottle to a person. And it was enough to elicit people to reach out to the water, to receive the water bottle from the robot much significantly earlier than alternative conditions. The robots can also trigger something called social facilitation in psychological terms, but that also means that essentially just by being in the same room as a person, it can affect the way that we do or do not do certain things, such as cheating or performing in a particular way. We have also been able to experiment with the notion of conformity. So back in the days, there's a very classical experiment called the ash line experiment. If you can take a look at the 4 bars at the bottom right-hand corner, this is an experimental condition that Ash has used to figure out, okay, so if you put a group of people together and ask simply, okay, which of the ABC lines are of the same length as the line on the left, then the answer should be very, very simple. And it's very, very clear what the one answer should be. But if you have a whole bunch of people around you who say the same wrong answer, then you will conform to the same wrong answer. There has been a series of number of experiments looking at conformity effects like this. And we were able to find that in the field of psychology, we understand that above four people in the same room saying the same thing will lead to majority conformity responses in a lot of people. And the question here was, can we actually trigger the same kind of effects in human-robot interaction? We don't necessarily see the same effects in human-robot interaction per se. The strength of the impact is quite a bit smaller. As you can see in the bottom picture there, you'll see 3 different robots dressed differently. This is not from the Moon at all, that's a mislabeling there, but But we were able to, as a field, understand that if you put a task that has a certain level of uncertainty, then the Ashline experiment, then people are happy to actually conform to the suggestions by a robot to fill the uncertainty that affects our decision making. Robots are also able to influence our decisions by taking over a sense of over-trust dynamics here. One of the studies conducted by Mahan Salem et al. Demonstrated that, if you bring participants over to a stranger's house and there is a robot butler in the room, and the robot actually asks the person to wait in the room until the owner arrives, and asks the participant to do a few different weird requests, then the majority of the participants will actually follow through. And some examples of this particular weird request include things like, okay, please take a look at the stack of letters that clearly do not belong to you, but the owner of the house, and dispose of them into the recycling bin. 90% of their participants actually follow through that request. Typically, if you were in somebody else's house, chances are you probably don't do that. Another strange request tested is to ask the participants to pour this bottle of orange juice from the bottle into a plant, into the planter. Again, most people don't feed orange juice into the plant, into a planter rather, and 68% of their participants actually follow through with that request. And there are other examples, such as Robinette's work in 2016, where we know that robots can be used to mislead people towards a wrong fire exit or emergency exit, even though you tell the participants that this particular robot may not guide you in the right direction, and this is the right direction. People will still blindly follow the robot instead of going to the right exit. So overtrust being a huge issue. So these are some of the many examples of the ways that robots can affect us simply by interacting with us. Now, you might think that, okay, the way people are influenced by robots is an issue, but there's also another set of issues as well, which is the question of how do we want people to treat robots? The video that you're seeing here is a robot in a mall setting and in Japan. A group of researchers took a look at how children were interacting with robots. And as you can see here, the children were quite abusive of robots, and they actually saw a few instances of children bullying robots, especially in a group setting. Now, this may make you wonder, okay, how are we comfortable with children bullying robots? It is a property of somebody. And at the same time, it does trigger bullying behaviors in children, which may be to be discouraged by adults. But how do we think about this? Now, they use this particular premise as a way to design predictively how to design a robot to navigate around this social situation so that they don't necessarily get into this bullying situation. But there's an opposite spectrum of this story as well, which is how do we want people to treat robots in the respect spectrum? So the video you're seeing right now is a child in the streets of Korea bowing to this robot who is clearly an adult looking and female looking. I don't know how much you know about the Korean culture, but I'm a Korean myself, and I definitely relate to this example, which is that as a younger person, if an older person is bowing to you, then you have to bow back. This is the only polite thing to do. This is the kind of social culture relating to the age and the social hierarchy that's involved. Now, you might think that the video is pretty cute because the child is being really cute with the robot, but to what degree are we using these robots that interrupt the social hierarchy and the social norms? To what degree is this healthy or not? I don't think there are really simple answers to these questions. one of the ways we can envision these types of issues is to think about robots as a new kind of scalable infrastructure of the future. Just like the way that Facebook or other social media platforms are sort of a social infrastructure, as in the kind of technologies or tools we use and depend on to shortcut a few different things we'd like to do in our daily life, such as socially connect with each other and depend on it. You can envision robots taking on the physical role of this story as new type of infrastructure. And what that allows us to envision is the kind of society where we can scalably manufacture these robots so that there are one robot in everyone's home, per every child, for example. And that allows us to access the programmability of the interactive features that you upload into the system so that the kind of interaction we have with a specific device is predictable and it does influence you in a predictable and scalable way across the globe. And that should scare you a little bit and be worried a little bit as well. But at the same time, it's also a necessary part of or a feature of the technology, because think about a possible future where, depending on the driver preference, you have an autonomous car that prefers to be more aggressive or not, or it prefers to kill 1 versus 5 people, or it prefers cats over dogs, right, so on and so forth. If you have this level of customizability depending on the driver or the owner of the car, then as the other driver or the pedestrian interacting with the world with those types of autonomous cars, you'll be very scared of any kind of autonomous cars in the future. And you'll be very distrustful of the kind of technologies, in part because you cannot predict the kind of behavior you can expect from autonomous cars. So in one sense, predictability can add a layer of trust, but at the same time, it also poses a cause for concern as well. So by now, I hope through these examples, I've given you an impression that there's really no one evil engineer, so to speak. There is no one in a basement typing away and coding something evil. But more broadly speaking, we have these technology-related issues, especially when it comes to interactive robots and potential issues we were thinking about. We have these issues because we have a bigger quest that we haven't been able to solve, and that is the question of what kind of society do we want to build for the future. It may be a little bit cliche to be talking about it because everything seems to come down to this bigger question, but I mean it in a quite specific way, because if we want to have a conversation about what kind of social hierarchy we want robots to come in, we need to have this very specific discussion about whether we should be teaching Korean children to bow to adult-looking robots. Right? It can't be a private company who is developing these marketing machines to create these systems for a particular kind of social structure and shape our norms of the future. I think it's much more healthy for us to have an open dialogue about this and create concrete steps towards the future that we want. So this is a collective societal issue. And in fact, I think the notion of infrastructure is really, really helpful in thinking through how we can address these big social and ethical problems that interactive robots impose in the future, which is when we have a huge infrastructure project in a city in our countries, we launch into a few different things. The first is public consultations. Any healthy societies will have a public consultation before they launch into billions of dollars of project, including things like the Montreal new Metropolitan Express project, which is the photo that you see on the left-hand side there. It's a $6.3 billion project. And the public consultation started back in 2015, and we're still constructing it. And things are changing over and over again because we're finding, oh, we can't go underground across the river, and now we have to go above the ground. And now the engineering design decisions about this particular infrastructure is tightly coupled with the communities that it's supposed to serve as well. It also, in looking at these technological artifacts as infrastructure, it also puts forward the idea that all of these artifacts do have politics. The priority decisions that we make, the way we decide whether we should prioritize owners versus clients that I mentioned earlier, all of that comes down to, in part, political decisions as well, and we ingrain it into it. And that particular type of decision should be integrated into the societal dialogues. But unlike highways and metros or expressways, robots and digital technologies can travel much faster, and it can scale much faster as well, and it impacts our global community rather than in individual cities. So global cooperation on these topics is really tricky to do. There has been increasing global efforts to deal with this issue, and one of the projects that I was able to engage in was the UN High-Level Panel on Digital Cooperation. Last year, the High-Level Panel published a report and declared the Declaration of Digital Interdependence. And what it really highlighted is the fact that digital technologies, and that includes AI and robotics, it really depends on us understanding the interdependencies of these technologies and how our social institutions are coupled within it. And it really emphasizes the point of responsible innovation, where each one of us act as stewards of the technology, where we need to monitor and take part in the solution setting as well. The first steps of doing that is really taking a look at what are some of the values that we share in our society. There are many different studies that have looked at the many AI ethics principles that has been published in the past, and in the recent past rather. In this particular paper, and we'll go into detail, they've taken a look at 36 AI ethics principles that's been published, and some other studies have looked at even 87 or other more principles as well, and we were able to highlight a few things that we share as a society on a global scale. But these principles remain very vague in terms of implementation. So today we're starting to see things like the Foresight into AI Ethics Toolkit, the Algorithm Watch, the ethically aligned design. Some of these key words are really links to toolkits for you to look into in the future. These are really checklists or different kind of guidelines to help individuals make the right decisions as we innovate forward. And it really aims to translate the AI ethics principles into practice in design and deployment decisions as well. But at the end of the day, I'm rushing through here a little bit, we have a lot of gaps to fill still, because these toolkits are very, very young. They came out in the past 2 to 5 years, and we still have to test what kind of value these AI ethics or roboethics toolkits can offer. And I believe that in order to fill the gaps that is lacking between the governance structures that we have, the policies, and the ethics issues that we're facing today, we really need to improve in 3 different areas. We really need to be able to educate individuals and ourselves in making the right decisions going forward by becoming aware of where these risks and ethics issues are coming from, and for what kind of reasons and what kind of technologies. And we really need to continue to do the research in looking at how these machines change the interaction dynamics between the humans and human-machine interactions as well, and how they affect our behaviors and decisions. And at the same time, we need to be able to share the knowledge and share the experiences that we might have as these technologies become more commonplace in the future as well. So if any of you are interested in participating in any of these types of issues, especially from the research end, the RAISE Lab is hiring. So feel free to drop me a line if you're looking for a PhD position or a master's position. But meanwhile, I do hope you found this particular talk insightful in looking at the interaction with machines and where the harms can come into play, and how you as an individual is part of the responsible and resilient innovation in the human-robot interaction domain as well. So thank you, and I will leave it there.
Great, thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. Gives us a lot of things to think about. I have a whole bunch of questions here, but maybe the first one, I'll collapse a number of the questions that came in and sort of create one meta question, which is a number of people are interested in how you got involved and what are some of the steps that one takes to get involved in this kind of work, and maybe a little bit of a description about like what kind of opportunities are at your lab for students like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got really interested in this domain because I wanted to become the next Bill Gates of robotics way back when. I don't know how many of you actually share this experience, but I thought, oh, Microsoft is it, and they've taken over the world with PCs of the world. And so I did my undergraduate in mechatronics engineering at Waterloo, and first semester, I realized, you know what, I'm learning how to build these robots, but nobody's telling me what I'm not allowed to build. So what are the bounding boxes of this design space? And so I could put a machine gun and some sensors and actuators together and then create the most lethal weapon system possible. And it would probably take me a weekend and nobody would say anything about it. And I thought, that's a really scary future. I don't really trust myself to build a system like that. And it was very scary for me to think that there are systems like that in warfare where killer robots is a thing that is being researched. So that's how I got interested in it. So I picked up a minor in philosophy, and my classmates thought I was crazy and having identity crisis because I was picking up a minor in philosophy on top of the engineering degree. But it really led me into a research domain that opened up this intersection between design of interactive machines and still giving me the room to think about the ethical dimensions of it. But it was really a lot of healthy mentorship by interdisciplinary researchers across the globe, including John. I'm really thankful for the kind of interactions we had in the past as well, in encouraging each other to study this domain. That being said, I am hiring students. There are application deadlines coming up in December for students who are interested in doing research at the PhD level, as well as master's and undergraduate internships during the summer.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and it's part of what I've been trying to do with my career is make things easier for people like yourself that come along and want to make these connections between technology and ethics. And at our school here at Sonoma State, we have a concentration within the philosophy department, philosophy, science, and technology, which is specifically designed so that somebody like yourself could get a second major or do a minor in these topics and apply it to their engineering careers. So excellent. So it's really exciting to see how successful you've been with that so far. So here's another question from an anonymous attendee. What do you feel about the diversity there is within technology? Is it very diverse or not? How about gender issues in the world in which you find yourself?
Yeah, diversity is definitely an issue in any field of STEM, especially in the Western part of the world as well. As a roboticist, I am considered a minority, a person of color as well as of gender, and studying ethics on top of that also puts me in the disciplinary minority as well. So there's triple minorities happening, whichever you decide to look at it. I do think it is an issue that we don't have as many female roboticists in the field. Um, I'm hoping that there will be more, and but at the same time, I am also seeing that in fields that are much more interdisciplinary, such as human-robot interaction, we do see a lot more of gender balance. In part because we see graduate students and faculties from other domains such as psychology, where there's quite a few female researchers coming into the domain as well. So yeah, you might find yourself in robotics and figure out, oh, there's nobody who looked like me, and then you get into a niche field within robotics and find that, oh, actually that's not really true.
Yeah, that's true. The HRI field is probably the most diverse within robotics, and it's a good place to break in. Um, so Trent would like to know, in the future of automation, will there be this division of the population between the people who have the skills to design these machines and run the companies that build them, and then just the other jobs that will be available will just be fixing the machines when they break?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a possible future we can envision, and a scary one as well, because I don't know if any of you are from the generation where you can actually change your engine oil and fix your car and change your tires by yourself. And we still do that these days, but more and more, we're starting to see technologies that you can't open up. And we also are starting to have this social structure that voids your warranty if you open up
Right.
the machine that you own. So I'm hoping that more people will be able to speak about technology and get their hands-on experience on technology, so that at the basic level, we're not afraid to really get our hands dirty, so to speak. But at the end of the day, I do think that requires us to be a little bit more patient with each other as we bring everybody aboard across the many different technological domains, because I could talk robotics and AI, but know nothing about quantum computing, for example. So we can't be a generalist for all the technologies or experts in all the technologies, so to speak. But we should be able to share a vocabulary together.
Right. So we're getting up close to the top of the hour, and I know that a number of the people here have to head off to other meetings or classes. So I want to thank you guys for coming, and I want to use this opportunity for us to all give you a virtual round of applause for this really wonderful talk. I am going to keep the line open, and we'll answer a few more questions for the people that can stay. But for those, we'll see you next time. We will not be meeting next week because of the holiday, but the week after, I will be giving a talk on the philosophical arguments around AI. So we'll be building on this topic as well in 2 weeks. So see you guys then. Okay, so let's dig into kind of an interesting philosophical question. Gennard asks, is there a critical capacity for this technology? I think meaning like a level that is going to be difficult to pass. For instance, one of the examples Gennard gives is the material resources on Earth. I know robotics uses a lot of rare earth metals and things that we may run out of. Definitely within the batteries are a big thing in robotics. So do you see a material shrinkage of the possibility of expanding robotics across the planet, or do you think that we'll find some technical way around these bottlenecks right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't really come across studies that mention more of the resource related limitations to manufacturing these robots and so forth. And it's also reminding me that there are robots that are not so traditional. They don't necessarily come in the hard casing of the steel or plastic that you envision robots to be in, but there are a whole bunch of robots called soft robotics, where we're looking at silicon or different kind of tissue-like materials um, to actuate and actually build the chassis of the robot itself. So I think there are flexibilities in terms of the materials that we use to produce these robots. And at the same time, in terms of the computational powers, we are envisioning a future where all these robots will be networked to connect with your home Wi-Fi and therefore the cloud and access much powerful machines off-site. So hopefully that does solve some of the issues of needing to create redundant computing systems. Of course, that comes with its own problems, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so let's take a look at one more of these. Jacob asks, as we move forward in the development of robots with the ability to perform simple tasks such as autonomous cars, it becomes clear that poor, uneducated workers will be affected the most. Do you think that there is a solution to this problem where a high education becomes required in order for our jobs in the technological future? Yeah, it seems like this last election in the United States has shown that there is a growing enmity or even almost hostility between the well-educated and the poorly educated, mostly over the fact that jobs are starting to not exist. There's a huge economic impacts to these people. So is robotics and automation just exacerbating that process?
I think it's fair to say that robotics does play a role in this, in the sense that automation, in general, does seem to affect our economy in interesting ways, such as those who have a lot can buy a whole lot of manufacturing machines and extract more wealth.
Hmm.
Does that seem fair? Not really. Now, do robots play the same role as traditional manufacturing machines of the previous industrial revolutions? I would say yes, it does. But the homework that I have, and I would like to really be able to address this, is through 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 the innovations in collaborative robotics or interactive robots, that using these robots for your own Etsy store, small businesses, medium businesses would become much more accessible. That you wouldn't really need an electrical or computer science undergrad education to be able to program a robot to do that last packaging work that just takes you forever to do. And you're an artisan, a worker of sorts. Then that particular piece of machine should be something like the way we treat cars. Back in the days, we asked people, "Do you have a license? Do you come with a car?"
Hmm.
Because that we need to be the traveling salesman. Perhaps in the future we can envision robots as, "Do you have a robot? Are you able to use it? Do you have a license to use it?" So that you can actually be your own boss, so to speak, in scalable work at home.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I'm keenly interested in as well. And some of your earlier slides pointed that there is a distinction between how we behave with and around these machines based on ownership, and it's interesting to think about how robotics, when we're thinking about home robotics, who's going to own that, or who's going to, what kind of ownership agreements are you going to get into when you buy one of these machines? So I'm thinking they're going to be something very similar to like an Alexa, where you may pay some minimal amount for the hardware, and you get to plug it into your house and put it where you want to, but
Mhm.
Amazon still maintains ownership of all of the programming and everything that happens within that machine. Do you imagine that this is going to be the way that robotics has to work for? I'm specifically here thinking about home robotics.
Yeah, I do see a trend towards that, especially when it comes to interactive features that sit on top of the robots and the data that it collects. But I do think that is quite dangerous because that locks people out from being able to be creative with their robots. One of the questions that I didn't really mention in the autonomous cars questionnaire was really, should a third party programmer be able to provide an update or debug on autonomous cars and distribute it. And that would be a contentious issue because we need to deal with this trust issue of, okay, Joe just had a patch on this. Do I
Hmm.
trust Joe and his ability to program and in a way that doesn't jeopardize my privacy and so on and so forth? So we do have quite a bit of maneuvering, social maneuvering to do there. But in terms of collaborative robots, I'm hoping that it will really not be the case. The cheapest collaborative robots these days go around, $40,000. That's coming in close proximity of affordability as cars. Hopefully, yeah, that also means that it becomes more like regular cars of the past.
Yeah, exactly. So here's a question from Nils, who asks, have the experiments on robots overthrust also been done, or overtrust, sorry, I misread that, also been done with humans, and how are the results different? Oh yeah, so have we done like a Milgram experiments with robots and that sort of thing where we overtrust the machine?
Yeah, so the overtrust issues that I mentioned, the experimental results that I mentioned are with real human participants. So I think, yeah, Maha Salim's work and then Robinette's et al. Work, they all involve human participants. In terms of the Milgram experiments, I don't know of anybody who has done it because of research ethics issues, I
Right,
believe, because
you
that's the
can't do that
classical.
experiment anymore.
Exactly. But I do know that some folks have tried to do an equivalent of that with virtual systems. Of course, virtual world is different from robotics. Um, but yeah, I do think um, there is a potential where we can actually explore how authority, hierarchy, dominance, and all of those human-human interaction, um, I guess, theories and the realities actually come into human-robot interaction. They're slightly different. They're not a straightforward match. So we need to figure out the theoretical framework that actually works well, but it does translate quite a bit.
Yeah, and I know Matthias Scheutz and his work with his lab. They've done a number of experiments on this, and there does seem to be some evidence that in certain circumstances humans will overtrust, and in some ways that experiment you showed earlier. Uh, that almost is an example of overtrust where you're just following the directions that the robot, even though they seem kind of silly or are not right, you continue to do it anyway because the robot asked you to pour the orange juice into the plant. And I'm sure that you're thinking, well, that's kind of a dumb thing to do, but you do it anyway because the machine asked. And that seems interesting, because if a person asked you to do that, you might say, did you really mean for me to do this thing? So there seems to be less, because of the language barrier between the user and the robot. There's less interaction or rethinking the situation or asking for clarification, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I do think there are issues that we bring forward because of the interactive features of the robots, but issues that we could perhaps address with different kind of interaction, such as negotiating and being able to understand people better and open up that channel of communication to say, well, did you actually mean that? Yeah.
Right. So the one thing I want to make sure we talk about before we end is there's a lot of questions around the children uh, interacting with the machine. They seem to be very aggressive with the machine, and I know Ila Nurbakash has also written about this as well. And his theory was that children see robots, especially diminutive size robots as beneath them in the pecking order, right? So that this is something that they can fairly put their aggression out towards. Can we solve that problem with through education of children, or just by increasing the size of the robot, right? So that the kids don't want to mess with it.
Yeah. No, I do think there are a couple of design things we could do. What the researchers who are studying this decided to do was essentially they analyze predictively when these bullying behaviors actually occur. And they found that whenever there are adults present, this disappears really quickly. And so they created this navigational system so that when the probability of bullying behavior goes a little bit high, then the robot will straightforward go towards an adult or things like that, so that it predictively prevents such a bullying behavior from occurring.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is a little bit of a side shoot of a solution than the actual solution problem itself, which is, okay, how do we want to educate our children with respect to the treating the robots, which is, I think, what Eli actually touches on a bit more.
Right. Mm-hmm. So another person asks, what are your plans for your lab over the next 5 years or so? What kind of projects are you interested in starting?
Yeah, I'm really curious to frame the notion of robot manipulation of humans in a quantitative risk kind of a framework. So there are phenomena where if you are in a repetitive kind of motion with a robot, then the robot can set the rhythm or the pace of the work. And it unconsciously allows you to unconsciously mimic the behaviors that the robot is doing, such as the pace and so on and so forth. And this is a very natural thing for humans to do. But to what degree is that actually harmful? Does it have ergonomic effects? Does it have mental, cognitive, and other effects? And what does that mean in terms of our liberty to be able to say that, okay, I recognize this as a workplace harm, which most labor countries with labor laws would say. And then B, because I know this is a harm and I recognize it as such, I can report it and do something about it, right?
Right.
So how do we build transparency around the impact that these robots have on humans, both behavior, and I mean that by emotions, and so on and so forth, and decisions, be it purchasing decisions, and being able to quantify it such that we can create standards and protect ourselves with very clear and concrete policy frameworks that gets integrated into the existing legal framework, and to be able to design around it as well. Because if we can't quantify harmful levels of influence, which is a big task in itself, then that means we can't create systems that modulate and manage that influence dynamic either. Yeah, so there's both technical and policy and everything in between, in a sense, but the theme is really the balance between human and machine autonomy and the kind of influence dynamics.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's well thought out. I agree with your analysis on this. So an anonymous attendee asked this question, which I think is important. In my philosophy of technology class this semester, we read Ruha Benjamin's Race After Technology, and in that she's arguing about the deleterious effects of the fact that diversity does not exist in the design field in technologies, especially high technologies. So do you feel that this lack of diversity in your field has led to adverse consequences and possibly dangerous consequences that as these technologies extend into society faster and faster, we will see that? Like, for instance, there was a period where autonomous cars couldn't see dark-skinned individuals, that sort of stuff.
I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, like the example that you've given, we see clear examples of where our own human biases as designers come into effect and affect the products that we put into the world. But I do think I do think diversity is something, it's an issue that we can solve. It just takes a long time.
Mhm.
I mean, Uber accident involving a person who was walking a bicycle on a highway.
Mhm.
The design, from what I understand, that the feature of detecting a bicycle in a highway condition was turned off because they
Right.
thought who would have a bicycle right across
Right.
the highway, right?
Right.
Is that a bias issue?
Mm.
Right? Is that an issue because we are dark colored, light colored,
Mhm.
female, male? I don't think so. I think it is because we're human and we make certain assumptions and they become part of our design. Um, would it be easier? Would we catch ourselves in these design decisions earlier so that we prevent these catastrophes from happening? I think yes, if we are able to have more diverse workforce in tech industry. Yeah.
Mhm. Excellent. So we still have like 34 questions. So I don't know how much time you have to waste with us, but we'll try one or two more. So uh, a couple of I'm trying to condense a bunch of questions into
Right.
one so that we can be more efficient. So a number of these questions that I'm looking at ask if sort of what your personal fears and hopes and fears are for robotics in the next generation.
Mm-hmm. My fears will be getting the robots to be a force of inequality, and that means both economic terms as well as that of power. I would be scared to see Facebook, Google, and Amazon own all the robots in the world.
Mhm. Right.
And with the kind of ownership conditions that we just talked about in terms of Alexa and so forth, uh, because that will allow the big tech who already own quite a bit of our communication lives to have a scalable manipulation effect in our more everyday decisions.
Yeah.
Um, and but then my hopes will be that more of us will actually become an active part in stewarding these technologies so that you are not afraid to have a robot at home because you can open it up, program it, and make somebody really happy with it,
Hmm.
including yourself,
Hmm. Hmm.
and make it an integral part of your life and livelihood. I think that becomes an equalizer rather than the opposite. And I think that requires us to have the kind of educational system and training programs such that you can envision a future with confidence where you can make use of the robots and maintain it yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, both you and I teach classes where we try to give students the capacity to hack into and change and alter robots, and we tend to use a Lego Mindstorm systems in both of our classes. And what I like about it is its modularity and extreme modularity. You can program it and you can change, the look and the shape and the size of it. And I would like to see robotics move more, consumer robotics move more in that direction rather than here's the finished project the way I, the Silicon Valley designer, think that you should use it in your home, instead allowing the user to have a bunch of parts and stuff that they can create something that makes sense for their lives. I think this would solve a lot of these problems that we're talking about. Do you agree with that, or is that technologically feasible? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And an example I'm thinking about is, the Play stores or the app stores of our cell phones today. People are envisioning consumer robots to open up this kind of marketplace. And Jibo, which is
Mhm.
a consumer robot, they tried this notion as well, I think, and
Yeah.
we never got to that point of having a marketplace of
Yeah.
apps for robots. But I do think it's definitely a possible future where as long as we as individuals have
Mhm.
a bit more of the capacity, then I think we can do so much more. Especially if we are able to challenge the legal systems that may prevent us from doing that. I can see the legal rationales to say, oh yeah, we need to protect the safety of the consumers by preventing them from programming their own robots because they might harm themselves and that's a legal risk for them. But I do think we need to challenge that notion, the right to maintain, repair, and reprogram.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so this is where it starts to meld in with things like maker philosophy and just these various ideas about homebrew technology, which is really great, but is faces a lot of challenges from the major companies that would like to see a little bit more of a proprietary design world.
Yeah, definitely. But then again, I mean, we see a bombardment of open source movements that are very successful in the AI world.
Right.
And a lot of these big tech companies are supportive of open source more broadly
Mhm.
now, and that's been a big culture shift.
Mhm.
And I like to attribute that that phenomenon to a few individuals who really
Mhm.
fought for that to be the case,
Right.
and have been successful as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, why don't we leave it on a happy note then? And thank you so much. We've used up almost an hour and a half, and
Thanks for having me.
yeah,
It's been
really
fun.
thanks. Yeah, definitely. Look forward to seeing you again when this world is not as messed up as it is. Hopefully, we'll see you at a conference or two next year. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good one, and